SoundCartel.
From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. What's the biggest risk to any small business? A toxic workplace culture, says workplace culture specialist and author Colin D Ellis, because productivity, employee health and public perceptions can severely impact the bottom line. Colin offers advice on how to overcome toxicity, which, as he explains to Jeff Waters, can also result from negative media coverage.
Toxic culture is every organisation's biggest risk. It doesn't matter whether you're a 5-person gardening company, which true story, I had a gardener who talked to me about this once, or a, kind of 100-person smaller business. Culture used to be a black box, Jeff. It used to be something that was invisible to the outside world unless you knew someone who worked within that culture who would then talk about it over a beer. They still talk about it over a beer, but they also share it on social media, and they actually share it with the media as well. In fact, the media is more interested in toxic culture stories now than it's ever been. And so they are looking for those stories. They're looking to expose bad bosses. We used to laud these people on things like Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares, but now the world has changed significantly. And it's something that senior leaders have to be really, really mindful of, because, we've got statistics like 1 in 4 people dreads going to work. 53% of women are more likely to experience a toxic culture. Odds of suffering a major disease if you work in a toxic culture are between 30 and 50%. But I think the main one for business owners is that it can kill results. So toxic cultures have been proven to reduce productivity by up to and over 20% in some instances. But also, if your business makes it into the media because of the behaviours or the performance of a particular manager or senior leader, it can absolutely destroy the business. No individual or company wants to be associated with a company in 2024 and beyond that's considered to be toxic, and that's why it's the biggest risk.
Do you have any idea why it's become such an interesting issue for the media and on social media?
Yeah, I do, Jeff. It's something I wrote about in Detox Your Culture, is the world has changed. So I know that sounds like a very, very obvious statement, but for those of us who remember the early 2000s, we came from the Gordon Gekko greed, for want of a better word, is good. And then we had the financial crisis. And what happened was all trust was drained from businesses who told us one thing but actually did another. And of course, it was the financial institutions that were largely in the crosshairs. But as parents of children, and I've got 2 teenagers myself, when I first started work, my dad said, "You're lucky to have a job," right? He said, "You're very lucky to have a job. Head down, bum up, do what your boss tells you. If you get a crack, you deserve it." Literally, they were the things that he told me when I started work in the mid-80s. That's not what we're telling our kids now. We're telling our kids the opposite. We're telling our kids that any company is lucky to have you. Find somewhere that's got values that match yours. Find a workplace that has purpose. And what I found, Jeff, when I was researching the book, is that for Generation Z, so the latest generation coming into the workplace now, 3/4 of them research an employer's culture before applying for their job. And that's because they've heard their parents, they've heard their parents moan about work for so long that they're determined not to fall into the same trap. We're bringing our children up to respect themselves more, which is a fabulous thing, to value themselves more, which is great. But leaders are still yet to catch up. They're still kind of crossing their fingers and hoping that great culture creates itself, when the reality is that Gen Z and millennials are looking to be part of that creation process.
Some would argue that those younger generations can help cause a toxic culture, though.
Yeah, that's not borne out by the statistics, Jeff, interestingly. I looked at 47 case studies around the world for Detox Your Culture, and every single one of them, it was the behaviour of a Gen X manager that caused the toxic culture. Now, that was a very small sample survey. I think that what you're more likely to see is Generation Z and millennials have different expectations of behaviours in the workplace. And I would agree that they're more likely to make allegations. But but they're largely borne out by old-fashioned behaviours. But again, it comes back to, something that I talk a lot about is the fact that we don't train managers on how to be modern managers. I did some management training not so long ago, Jeff, and I trained a guy. He's like, I needed this information 30 years ago. There's no real understanding of the different generational requirements. And so consequently, kind of older managers, and I include some millennials in that as well, they get really confused about what's the right thing to say and what's the right thing to do. And yet it's incumbent upon managers to keep up with the times, certainly with regards to behaviour.
So what's your first advice to somebody who thinks that they have a toxicity problem in their workplace?
Yeah, so investigate it thoroughly, Jeff. So really have a conversation with the individual. Treat it extremely seriously. Don't be flippant. Don't gaslight them in any way. Take copious notes and then interview the other individuals involved without sharing the allegations that have been made. Often that happens in smaller businesses, like, listen, so-and-so has said this. We just want to check facts, which is completely the wrong way to do things. I always think independence is good. If it's a serious allegation, you'll definitely want a third party to do that interviewing for you, and then make sure that you investigate it thoroughly and then present the findings in a way that generates understanding and a commitment to move forward in a different way. Anything else, and it's only liable to increase the toxicity.
All right, so let's circle back around to that 5-person gardening outfit. What can you tell us about what happened to them?
Yeah, so that was really interesting. So that was a millennial employee. And I only mention that because I think it's important to understand that there are some generational differences, certainly with regards to upbringing and expectations around behaviour. The owner of the business was extremely frustrated at the timekeeping of this particular individual to the point where he lost his temper with him. The person in question lost their temper back. And consequently, there was almost fisticuffs. And so the boss of the business, was up in Queensland, actually, he just had a chat with me and he was like, am I the root cause? And I said, well, yeah, you should never have lost control of your emotions in the first place. All you did then was become the aggressor. And your job is to be the adult in the room, even though they were both adults. So your job is to be the adult in the room and make sure that you set expectations really clearly. Write that down, make sure they've got it on a bit of paper or an email to say, my expectation is we start at this time every single day. And the third time that they fail to do that, then you're quite within your rights to serve the notice to say your performance has fallen below expectations. But of course, the big bit that was missing there, Jeff, was understanding the expectation setting process. He said, I just told them what time we start. I was like, it's got to be more formal than that in order for it to be an official contract of work.
So is that something we should all be doing, actually formalising and writing down the expectations and the processes and perhaps getting the employee to sign that so that there's shared understanding?
Well, I think my personal view, Jeff, having been an employee myself for the best part of 30 years, is it's better if you create a shared agreement with the team. And this is, even though I said that to the head of the gardening team, I said, listen, the best thing that you can do is as a team, spend a day not doing the job. And his view was, that's an opportunity cost. And I'm saying you will get that back in spades in terms of productivity. Spend a day just agreeing how you're going to work together, what are your expectations of each other. And then as a manager, you be the one to write those expectations down, to say, this is what we as a team have agreed. This is our social contract between each other. And, the ideal is for the team to hold that individual to account. And this is something I used to do as a manager myself, is if the team let each other down, it was the team that held that person to account. It never really got escalated to me. In fact, one of my proudest moments as a manager was when the team sorted something out and I found out about it 6 months later. I'm like, what are you talking about? They were like, oh yeah, we sorted that out. You didn't need to know. But that's only because we'd actually taken the time to agree what our culture was, agree what the performance standard was, hold ourselves to that. And even though I was the person that wrote all of that down, it was the team that actually held each other accountable to the agreement.
That was workplace culture specialist and author Colin D Ellis. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow @BE Daily Podcast across social media And head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast.
SoundCartel.